Hey, tech leaders. I'm Carol Palombini, psychologist and tech leadership coach, and this is my podcast, Tech Minds Insights. My mission is to be the change agents for tech leaders grappling with communication issues, imposter syndrome, burnout, and the complexity of the tech leadership roles. In this show, I invite leaders and consultants working in the tech space to provide you with the real-world insights into the challenges of leadership. If you want to be part of the show or have questions you'd like me to ask my guests, send me an email or DM on LinkedIn. And my guest today is Gordon. Gordon is a successful CTO and engineer leader who has worked from startups to PLCs across a range of industry, specializing in data-centric B2B SaaS systems. So welcome, Gordon. Say something about you and explain a little bit about your career path.
Hi there. Yeah, I started, I saw my first computer at age 12, ZX81, which dates me. And from that moment, that was going to be my career, software. I realized I didn't have to do any handwriting. That got away from the first few years of my school career being beaten up about terrible handwriting. And now I'm the only one that needs to read my handwriting, and I still can't read my own handwriting. So I went from there. I ran my own software development business instead of stacking shelves in Sainsbury's when I was 16. Degree in computer science, 4 years as a developer, a dark period in project and program management, although always managing software development, and then came back into the fold as a CTO. And I've been, as you say, CTO in a whole variety of companies over the last 15 years or so.
Wow, that's an amazing career. And our previous conversation mentioned something that was super interesting about your leadership career. So I would like to tell our audience what was the biggest obstacles and the major allies you have into going from a developer into a leader.
So I guess I had a big leg up. When I was an adolescent, I joined a sailing project called London Sailing Project back then. It's now called the Rome Sailing Project. And that was a charity where they'd take kids, chuck them on a big boat, on a yacht, and take them sailing for a week. So you'd get kids that had never seen a boat before and kids that did sailing as a hobby, bring them together and make them work together for a week. And I progressed up that organization, became a watch leader, watch officer. So at the age of 16, 17, I was leading 6 guys at 4 a.m, changing sails, pulling anchors up. Nobody really wants to be up at 4 a.m in the dark and the wet doing that. And that taught me a lot about leadership that would take an awful long time to learn in business, and you'd have to be quite mature to get there. So when the time came for me to start leading teams in business, I'd already learned a lot of the really hard lessons about, it may be that I could do it faster myself this time, but that's not a long-term strategy. You need to develop your team. You need to be able to step back and see what the team are doing. It's no good if you're head down in a task, things are going on behind you. You can't see that. Your job is to step back, see what the whole team are doing, develop the team, make sure that they're able to do the jobs themselves.
And what was the biggest challenge for you to becoming this leader? What was the hardest part?
I think it is in each type of task, knowing, look, I could just go and do it. Look, just get out of the way. I can code it myself. In the time it takes to explain it, I can code it myself. But that isn't a sustainable solution. You need to allow the team to make their own mistakes and develop. And in doing that, the next time you have a task like that, you don't have to explain. Just say, I'll do that again, and it's done. And you can do that for your team of 6 people or whatever, and you're multiplying your effect by 6 times by doing that. If you're micromanaging or just find yourself stepping onto the front line the whole time just to get stuff done because it's easier, you're not going to get that multiplier.
Yes, and in the end, you're not going to be leading, right?
Indeed.
You're still stuck in the problem solver mindset. You're still there thinking about the priority. It's get things done with the fastest speed and not developing a future team. So it's a short-term mindset against the strategic mindset. But I don't want to get into that now because we are going to get into strategic mindset in a while. Now, I would love if you could tell everyone, like, what do you see as your leadership mission and priorities as a CTO?
Okay.
There are many, I think there are many different kinds of views on the CTO's responsibilities. I have seen many different definitions what a CTO is. So in your reality, what does it mean to be a CTO and what is your mission?
Yeah, I think there's three, probably four dimensions to being a CTO as I see it. There's the architecture and technology, making sure that the tech you're building and what the tools you're using to build it are correct, right? Not necessarily the best, shiniest, newest things, but they are the most effective for the job you're trying to achieve. Perhaps the most important, particularly for this podcast, is building the team, making sure the team's effective, making sure they've got the right processes, the right relationships internally and externally to the rest of the business, creating an environment in which all those team members can be their best, do their best, and to some extent giving them air cover, keeping them away from unnecessary politics and making sure they don't have distractions. They understand what they're focused on while still having context and understanding how what they're doing impacts the business. That's the biggest bit. Then there's, if you're a SaaS business, the operation of the system you're producing, making sure it's reliable, sustainable, scalable, etc., etc. And the fourth bit, and I think the bit that a lot of us forget, is the managing up bit, the managing the board, the investors, your manager, depending on the size of the organization. And by managing up, I don't mean, I mean making sure you've got transparency over what's going on, so that the high, whoever you're reporting to knows what's going on and is comfortable with that and understands why things are as they are and what you need to make things better. And that in itself is a difficult task, because you have to explain sometimes fairly technical things to people that either aren't technical or just don't have the time to spend getting into the nitty-gritty. You need to be very concise, very clear, think very carefully about how you communicate.
Yes, I think communication is one of the biggest challenges for tech leaders, especially those that look for my services and look for my coaching. And I see when I talk to them, I see they have these ideas, this restless mind, many ideas and many things rushing in their minds, and they just have problems expressing them. So it's kind of frustrating because they have a lot to say and they feel that they're not heard, but it's not a matter of people not paying attention to them or not taking their opinion as important. It's more of, I just can't understand what you're talking about. I can't understand why you're telling me this. So why are you telling me all technicalities for me? I just don't understand. And the problem is that the CTO, the tech leader, misses the golden opportunity to make relationships with the board, with all other stakeholders, because the 2 or 3 first minutes of their presentation or explanation is full of technicalities. It's more about the how than the what for. The what for should come first, right? You should just say, okay, this is why I'm telling you this. This is why you're spending your time listening to me. And then if it's necessary, you move to the how you intend to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's why I think that the moving from a developer, from a leader to a leader role, it requires a lot of self-awareness regarding your communication. Is it enough to communicate with people that are not in your comfort zone? And there's another challenge that you mentioned, was how to pick the best technology. You mentioned that tech people, not just tech leaders, love technology. And that passion for technology could be a trap. And so how do you pick the best technology? You have all these amazing things happening. How do you pick the best technology for the businesses that you are working for?
Yeah, great question. I think you have to understand the context, where you are now, where you're trying to get to, what your timescales are, what your resources are. I'm very wary of what I call CV-driven development. There's quite a drive for quite often you find engineers will go, well, here's the shiny technology. I'd love to learn that shiny technology. I'll find a way of cramming it into my current work. Oh yes, we should definitely use this latest framework. The framework we're using at the moment is 5 years old. It's out of date. We need to move on to the next one. And you've really got to understand what are the benefits of moving, what's the costs of moving, and what's the payback time, if any, in doing that. It's very easy to spend your whole life refactoring, re-engineering as you move on and on and on. On the other hand, you don't want to get stuck in an ancient technology that's becoming hard to use and is being massively outpaced by technology. So I think and there's a few dimensions to how you think about that. There's, what are you trying to achieve and what's your environment? So it's very easy to look at what the FAANG companies are doing and go, oh, Facebook are using this technology. We should definitely use that. Well, you don't have 1 billion users all talking to each other. If you've got hundreds of thousands of users, then you're probably doing quite well. So you have a different scale of problems, and be careful about using big, heavy hammers to crack a small nut. From the team perspective, do you have the skills now? How easy is it for your current team to get across those skills? How easy is it to hire new team members when that comes? And if you're adding a technology to your stack, then you're adding a row to your job spec. I had a case early in my leadership career where we had a web developer that had more or less been given his own head for a few years. And when we came to hire his replacement, we looked at the technology requirements. And it was basically every web framework that had been mentioned for the last 7 years. Every page was written in a different technology because it was CV-driven development. And you've got to be careful every time you add a technology to your tech stack. That's harder to hire for, harder to onboard and train for. So you've really got to try and keep that tech stack compact and fit for purpose. There was I think Abraham Lincoln's attributed to a quote: "If you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe." And the idea of that is you should hone your skill set and get really good with your tools before you start trying to do anything with them. And I think that's very true, except if someone's going to come along this afternoon with a chainsaw. And I think that's the situation we find ourselves in with AI, where stuff is moving so quickly. With something like Java, it's still worth becoming a real Java expert because it's still a current technology. It's still a perfectly sensible choice for building applications with. So it's worth getting really good at that and really understanding that, because those guys are worth their weight in gold. With AI, if you get you're really focused on the current technology, by the time you've learned that, there's 2 or 3 other generations come out. So you've really just got to get in with that technology and just use what's there. You're not going to have time to become an absolute expert. You need to get in with what's there, make it useful, and move on, and be able to grab the next thing as it comes. So probably abstracting the precise technology you're using, wrapping your application around that, and then just iterating that technology as it evolves from outside your business, most likely, and allowing you to update that very quickly. So there's sort of two approaches there. One is the core technologies that have been here or are going to be here for a while, get really good at those. And the stuff that's just moving past so fast, jump on the train and don't get left behind digging deeply into any one particular technology.
I think everyone will love your approach. The X metaphor was amazing. I loved it. And I think it actually put these pictures, like translate all the tech things into non-technical things. And it's actually a good example to give CEOs and non-technical leaders about what's going on and about your decision. So using metaphors is a very good way of explaining your decisions. And what I also see when in your response is that leaders actually need a lot of emotional intelligence to have a strategic mindset. So research shows that only 4% of leaders exhibit a strategist mindset. So this is appalling, okay? So this is a problem. This shift in thinking actually helps leaders to understand the complex interplay between oneself, others, the systems, not just stakeholders, but the complexity of the environments that you just mentioned when you used the example about AI. So to exercise this mindset, leaders can invest in developing emotional intelligence. And what we want to do in this podcast is also translate all of this into emotional intelligence. So the first thing is also always self-awareness. What you say then is that leaders must be self-aware to understand their tendencies to go to the next shiny thing. So, okay, I am like this, I'm passionate about technology, so I'll probably do that. So understanding that you have this tendency will also refrain you from jumping head on things that are not sustainable in the long term. So exchanging the short-term vision, your passion, for the long-term vision, which is your legacy. So that's what you have to wait. The second thing that's most important for developing in leadership, in emotional intelligence leadership, is the empathy. Because you mentioned all stakeholders there, speaking to managing up, speaking to clients, it's getting out of the comfort zone of speaking tech only with your team where it's comfortable, and you have really to empathize with the other side. Because if you don't, how you're going to communicate the benefits? How you're going to convince anyone if you don't actually understand what they expect from you and what they need? And the third skill I'd like to mention here, in my opinion, is the ones that tech leaders lack the most, which is organizational awareness. To understand the dynamics of an organization and its culture, assessing the complexity of the environment. So to learn about how the organization works, take the view that the organization is a system of interacting parts within a bigger system, the socioeconomic environment. And that's what I think that tech leaders should be working more on, in broadening their views. So once you broaden your views, you're aware of your tendencies, you empathize with others, and you kind of understand the organization and how it works, you have this organization awareness, then you're building this strategic mindset. So in your opinion, taking all of this into consideration, what do you think are the biggest challenges for leaders, for tech leaders this year in 2024?
I think the main challenges are the same as they've always been, and that will depend on your company context to some extent. The pace of change is inevitably increasing, I think, particularly around AI. And whether you have to pick up your pace, as I kind of mentioned earlier, is that's a decision to be made. Do we need to jump on that bandwagon now? How hard do we jump on it? Which bits of technology do we update, and which bits do we pick a good solid solution and stick with it? I think AI is something that you need to be updating very quickly, because we haven't settled on any, it's moving too fast. There's no the definition of good just is moving week by week, month by month. Other technologies, I think there are good solutions for building any kind of SaaS solution now. Pick one, stick with it for a while, and when you start looking at the next iteration of that technology, really look at the cost and benefit of it, what the return on investment is going to be and the payback time, and just resist jumping to the next shiny thing. And think of everything as a think from the start about the business case, because that's what you're going to have to take to your leadership colleagues, is the business case. Why are we going to spend X weeks or months refactoring to get this new technology? The board aren't going to care about the new technology. What they care about is the investment you're making and the return you're going to make on that. So we're going to invest 3 man-months in doing this, and the payback will be, we'll have faster releases, we'll be more reactive to customers, we'll be able to get more features out the door, which will result in more revenue, and that's when the eyes will light up.
Yeah,
as long as you've made that case. Nobody cares about, oh, put us on the latest technology and the developers will be happy. Great, but from a board perspective, who cares?
I imagine our audience just hurts to listen to that.
It's true. It's true. I mean, you can make a case. It's good to have a happy team, and certainly that's what I want for my team. I really genuinely want them to be happy because it makes everything else easier. But from a hard-nosed board member's perspective, the team happiness is, when it comes down to it, is makes them more effective and makes the company more profitable or
That's true.
more beneficial. So that it's a means to an end. And what you need to be presenting them is the end. Is if we do this, then this will be the benefit. And you've got to talk in their language for that.
Sure, amazing. And imagine now there's a new leader in your team. This is their first leadership position. What advice would you give them?
Well, we talked about stepping back, not jumping in and doing the task, letting team members make controlled mistakes, letting them learn for themselves to some extent. Be a coach more than a. And I think in terms of the man management part of it, the people management part of it, think about things from the team member's point of view. How would I suppose the base level is how would you like to be led? The advanced level is how would your team member like to be led? Because they may be different to you. They may be, neurologically different, may have a different gender, different cultural background, different view on life, different priorities. How would they like to be led? And how best can you approach them to get the goals, to achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve?
So it's all about communication.
It is, but what I learned from sailing early on is it's no good just standing there and shouting at someone to pull harder or code faster. That work longer. That doesn't work. You've got to. I found it work longer thing. I found it much more effective when the chips are down. It's far better to have a team that will just go, this needs doing, right, I've cleared my calendar, I'm going to do it. And they volunteered to do it because they've got the context and understanding and the buy-in and the emotional commitment to you as a leader and the task, than to say, right guys, you've all screwed up, we're late, I need you to work your weekend. That's horrible and very short term, and you're burning a lot of matches when you pull that card. Having a team that's doing it because you've built that relationship and that context and that buy-in to the task makes life a lot easier in the longer term.
That's true. It's true in any team, especially in tech teams, that people are very introverted. If you're not proactive in reaching out to them and asking the questions, they will not be the ones that coming to you, right? So you have to be really proactive in getting the information that you need from them in order to lead them well, to understand how they're going to be motivated. Yeah. And there are so many ways of doing that. You can get assessments, you can make them do assessments and then talk to them about those assessments. There are many ways that you can do that. Just pick your poison, pick what works best for you and actually do it, but be proactive in doing this. Well, Gordon, we are reaching the end of the podcast of this amazing conversation. And I would just like you to leave a podcast or a book recommendation, something that you feel that would be good for leaders to learn.
Yeah. Well, my favorite podcast, and it does have a sort of certain amount of business relevance, is Cautionary Tales from the BBC. And I love this because it tells a story of some disastrous event. And that in itself is quite gripping. Titanic, the movie, is gripping because it's it's a disaster, and it then weaves the personal stories around that, but pulls out of it real lessons of why it happened and the sort of human tendencies that cause it to happen and the organizational failings that led to it. Air crashes, building collapses, business failures, all sorts of domains, but fascinating stories with a real learning in them.
Thank you very much. That's very unusual, and I'm really curious about the podcast.
Definitely worth a listen.
I'll definitely include them in my list.
Yeah.
So thank you, Gordon, for being my guest today and for all the amazing insights. And if you found this conversation interesting, please consider sharing it. Just click on the link I included in the post or the video description, and I'll see you in the next episode of Tech Minds Insights.